Justice League 10 Ways the Theatrical Cut is better than the Snyder Cut.
What the actual fuck did you just say to me right now? Get out of my sight.
Have him flying overseas, crying over me. I am openly a cunt to him. See if I roll the D, I am going to unleash a giant load.
Well boys, it's a new year. I think it's time we take a moment and talk about something I haven't discussed in a while. Some journalism cringe. More specifically, comic book journalism cringe. It's been a while since we looked at some awful articles. That's because I already don't have many brain cells left, so I'm not trying to lose them. It's really no surprise that most journalism is a joke, and are usually just there to push an agenda or to spread misinformation, or to report on shit that's either a non-issue and just trying to create a problem, especially in the TV, movie, and entertainment world. And then there are some that are just straight up dumb and kind of funny to laugh at. Which brings me to the article we're going to be looking at today. Justice League. 10 ways the theatrical cut is better than the Snyder Cut. Justice League was a critical and commercial disaster. However, the Snyder Cut turned out to somehow be worse than Joss Whedon's theatrical cut. Is it really? I've honestly seen people who don't even like Zack Snyder that much come out and openly admit that, yeah, it's way better than Joss Whedon's cut. But you know what? Let's go ahead and look at your reasons. Maybe you can convince me. So what are the 10 things that the theatrical version does better than the Snyder Cut? Oh, before we get into the list, check out this nice little intro. It briefly touches on the fact that Zack Snyder had to leave the project and Joss Whedon took over, and how the 2017 film was a disaster. Then he goes on to say, luckily for certain fans, many of whom were behind massively toxic harassment campaigns, HBO Max released a 4-hour Snyder Cut of Justice League to their streaming service. However, that version turned out to somehow be worse than Joss Whedon's theatrical cut. So what's funny is, I've been following the Snyder Cut movement for a while, and I've been hearing about these massive toxic harassment campaigns, but I've never actually seen it on a large scale. Are there toxic fans? Of course there are. That goes with any fandom. But these journalists always try to make it out that these Snyder Cut fans are toxic and crazy, and all they do is harass people, when the vast majority of the ones I've seen and interacted with are pretty sane. So they take a small portion of the fan base and put a magnifying glass on it and say, boom, that's all the fans right there. So from this passage alone, you can clearly tell where this person stands and how this article is gonna go. Anyway, let's go on to the list now. Number 10, it's overly long. They basically think that the movie has a very slow pace, boring monochromatic cinematography, and awful CGI. And the length only exacerbates and amplifies the already existing issues. And they go on to say that even though the theatrical cut is too short, they actually prefer it given the choice between the two. So you prefer the version that has underdeveloped characters, a rushed plot and story, little to no world building, and one of the simplest one-note antagonists I've ever seen, and not to mention the inconsistent tone that changes from scene to scene. But you know what, to each their own. Although to be fair, I have seen people say that they do wish the Snyder Cut was shorter, and that they could cut out about 20 or 30 more minutes of the movie, but I've never seen anyone say they actually prefer the 2-hour Justice League version. First time for everything. Anyway, number 9, Superman got to be Superman. One of the biggest issues with Snyder's vision is the fact that it had no room for Superman. Sure, Superman existed in the Snyder films, but in the 3 films he directed, Superman never once got to be the optimistic paragon that fans are used to. And while that made sense in Man of Steel, as it was Clark coming to terms with his powers, it's maddening that Superman remained dour and unfun for almost 10 hours of runtime across 3 long films. However, Justice League's theatrical cut, by contrast, showcased a fun, caring Superman who jokes around and goes out of his way to save civilians. It might have only been for 5 minutes, but it was a good 5 minutes, and proved Henry Cavill was perfect casting when given the chance. So you prefer this Superman?
But I'm also a big fan of justice.
I take it back. I want to die.
Know what? That's fine. You go ahead, you keep him. Because I'll take this Superman instead. The one that appears calm and collected, and finally realizes his purpose. One that doesn't drop some corny ass one-liners.
No, impressed.
Number 8, Steppenwolf looks better.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Up front, the villain Steppenwolf looks awful in the theatrical cut too. His big CGI body is too rubbery and fake looking to be menacing, and his face exists right in the middle of Uncanny Valley. Again, the problem isn't that Steppenwolf looks good in the theatrical cut, it's just that the spiky, overly shiny, somehow even more rubbery looking Steppenwolf from the Snyder cut looks worse. Yeah, no, you're just lying to yourself at this point. I mean, for starters, the CGI on Steppenwolf looks actually finished in the Snyder cut, and he doesn't look like some old dude. Steppenwolf in the theatrical cut looks like Liam Neeson. His design is just really boring. Not to mention, as a character, he's also incredibly boring. At least Snyder Cut gave him not only a backstory, but it gave him a better motive. But going off just their appearance alone, I disagree. Snyder Cut Steppenwolf looks way better. Number 7, a lot of the humor still works. Okay, so in this section, he openly admits that Whedon's jokey dialogue doesn't mesh well with Snyder's tone, which made the Whedon cut a tonal disaster, but yet he still prefers it over Snyder's. Then he says for all the cringy jokes that didn't work that well, like the brunch joke, and where he falls on top of Wonder Woman, there are a lot of humorous scenes that do work. Then he goes on to name just 2, and it's the same 2 scenes that everybody else enjoys. There's when Aquaman's sitting on the lasso of truth, and at the very end where the Flash and Superman race each other. Congratulations, in a 2-hour movie you picked out 2 jokes that were kinda humorous. What's funny is there are jokes that are in the theatrical cut that are also in Snyder's cut, meaning that Snyder already shot them and they were just reused by Whedon. But hey, don't you worry, the Whedon cut's got you covered with the Aquaman fish joke. Not 1, but 2 of them.
Do you talk to fish?
I want to die.
Number 6. Doesn't unnecessarily kill Cyborg's dad. There are many genre cliches that should be left in the past. While Snyder's Justice League avoids many tropes, it definitely falls face first into one as Joe Morton's Dr. Silas Stone, Cyborg's father, sacrifices himself to save the, mostly, white cast. Something actor Morton did 30 years ago in Terminator 2. That's how pervasive this trope is. It becomes even more egregious when one realizes he was the only other major POC cast member in the film besides Ray Fisher's Cyborg, since Iris West is only in one scene. Oh man, that's a really good point. I can't believe Snyder did that. Just killed off a person of color like that. Just removing them from the movie. Oh, wait a minute. If we're gonna go down this route, then I think we need to take a step back and take a look at some of the characters that were cut out of Joss Whedon's version. Well, for starters, Iris West was cut out, as well as all Ryan Choi's scenes. And not to mention, Cyborg's father plays a much bigger role in the Snyder Cut, so not only is he more important, but you also see more of him. He has a much smaller presence in Whedon's version. There's also Cyborg's mother. Her scenes were completely scrapped as well as the scene where Cyborg helps the Hispanic single mother. And finally, and most importantly, Cyborg basically had all his scenes removed. Most of his backstory and character arc is just gone. So it's just laughable. This guy just takes Cyborg's father's death and goes, oh my god, I can't believe they did that to a person of color. Meanwhile, he's in favor of a movie that basically cut out all POC characters. It's fucking ironic. Probably should have brought it up because now you look stupid. Number 5. Wonder Woman reveals she never gave up. Yeah, I don't really care. Yeah, no offense, but I don't really care about this one. So let's move on to number 4. Darkseid isn't a weak punk. So this entry is kind of stupid because he openly admits that Darkseid's not in the theatrical cut, but yet he still prefers that over what Snyder does with him. He basically explains that he thinks Darkseid was taken out too easily and that he got his butt kicked during the war, and so he doesn't really come off as a threat. I mean, to be fair, it took 3 literal gods and King Atlan to take him out, and right before then he laid waste to a lantern, as well as tossing foot soldiers around like they're ragdolls. I mean, I would have liked to see Darkseid do more, but considering he's actually in the movie, I take that over the one mention that he has in the theatrical cut any day. Number 3. The Snyder Cut's R rating is excessive. This section is basically the same shit we heard months ago when it was announced that it would be rated R. People saying, oh my god, it's a Justice League movie. These characters shouldn't be in rated R material, while completely ignoring the fact that the source material is actually pretty bloody, and how all these characters have been featured in some very mature content, be it their animated films, or like I said, their comic book source materials. And even though the movie is rated R, it's not excessively violent or bloody. And then at the bottom, he says that the violence isn't true to the characters like Wonder Woman and Superman, because they aren't Deadpool and the Punisher, and ends it by saying, it's not the violence that's the issue, it's who's perpetuating it that is. Ah yes, because Wonder Woman and Superman never had very bloody battles against their enemies. They never killed anyone, they've never been beaten within an inch of their life. It just doesn't happen. It's such a very basic, surface level look at these characters. If you dig further than just the live action versions, into the comics or hell, even just the animated movies, you will tell that these characters have been featured in some pretty bloody and mature content. I swear, the way you hear people describe the R rating in this movie, they make it seem like it's on the same level as Deadpool or Watchmen. It's not even close. Okay, so the last two, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty indifferent about. Number 2 is saying the Martian Manhunter scene just felt unnecessary, and how in a way it kind of ruined the scene between Lois and Martha, because it was revealed that Martian Manhunter was just disguised as Martha the whole time during that conversation. And number 1 is saying the post-apocalyptic ending was awful and unnecessary. I mean, for me personally, if you like it, you like it. You don't, you don't. It doesn't bother me either way. I've actually talked to people who don't care for these two scenes specifically, and I see where they're coming from, but for me personally, it doesn't bother me. Although it is weirdly including these two things on the list, because the article is titled 10 things that the theatrical cut does better than the Snyder Cut, but these last couple entries, it fails to say what the theatrical cut did better. It's just saying, these scenes are bad that are in the Snyder Cut. I don't know, it just felt kind of off considering there's no comparison to it in the theatrical cut. So I went ahead and looked at some of the comments, and I found just one person agreeing with the article. They said, agree with all your points. Say what you will about Whedon, but he just has a much better grasp on these characters and superhero story structure in general than Snyder. Whedon made just one good superhero movie and somehow has a better grasp on it than Snyder does? Sure. The rest of the comments are people disagreeing and roasting it. I love this one. Dude, you wasted my time. You suck. You see, articles like this reminds me why I don't visit these websites. But anyway guys, can do it for the video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, go and drop a like on it. I think this will be the last article we look at for a while, because there's no way they make something dumber than this. Oh, fuck.
2 to the 1, 1 to the 3. I like good pussy and I like good trees. Smoke so much weed you wouldn't believe.
For the last time, Parker, our pronouns are they, them. Not because we are non-binary, but because we are literally two niggas.